Yeah, and the one that surprised me was the ball face filly.
Yeah.
I put a saddle on her Friday, and she was legitly a bronc.
Really?
Sucker can buck.
Oh, God.
But I think there's no correlation. I know there's no correlation between first saddle buck and first ride buck.
Right.
I mean, I've seen them come unglued, and you think, "Holy cow, I ain't getting on that."
Yeah.
And then the first ride, they're fine.
Yeah.
And then I've seen ones that just no sweat. The big paint gelding walked off like he'd had a saddle on 40 times.
Really? And on the ground, he's a little bit
He's a
questionable.
little fractious.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's come a long way. So that's the other thing that's fun about that class is when we get him in August, pull him out of the pasture, it's always one of those moments where you go like, I don't know how this is going to go. This ain't what I want it to be. And in September, you're like, dang, these things are coming along.
Yeah.
And by October, November, they're pretty nice.
Yeah.
So, and of course, they don't sell till December, so I think it's pretty good.
Right.
But, hey, how's 75 hard going?
Good.
Is it because it's not going good for me? I'm doing it. But it ain't going as good as it was.
Well, for me either. Because I was doing it, but I wasn't really doing it. Well, if I get that other 45 minutes in today, okay. If not, it's okay. If I get the reading in, okay. If I don't, okay. And now it's like, you got to do it. You got to do it. Like, it's not a choice. It's bedtime. It doesn't matter. You hadn't finished your 10 pages.
So
you got to do it.
I was actually in the summer. I told one of my buddies he's done the whole program. That this is easy.
Yeah,
it's easy. I don't know what y'all are fretting about. It ain't no big deal. But my summers are a lot more under my control. So I'm not teaching classes. I've got these weeks like state horse show that are cumbersome but manageable.
Right.
Now it's like I get up at 4 a.m. and hustle till 10, 11 at night just to get work, family, and 75 hard phase 1 in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And phase 1's more difficult. Adding those 3, 4, 5 things is challenging.
Yeah.
But anyway, if anybody's listening that hasn't done 75 hard, TJ's the 75 hard guru and got me into doing it. I actually had a friend that was doing it, and then I heard TJ did it, so I had to do it.
It's where I got it, actually, there's a Thursday morning devotional, and I don't do a good job of staying on that. But Lee Olson put it up on there. He's a farrier out there in Weatherford, Texas. And so that's where it kind of got in my mind. And when I looked into it, I'm like, man, I got to do that. And I know it won't be easy at first, but it'll require discipline. And
being a farrier, I would think, would be if you're sweating all day, picking up feet, handling horses, trimming, tacking on shoes, under an anvil in an oven, you're wore out when you get home. So how are you handling that? Are you doing half of it in the mornings and half at night?
Yeah. So the half of it, the first 45 minutes, I do running every morning. That's just that way I got that out of the way, and then I get the other 45 after I get home. And it's just you just do it.
And right now, I'm doing mine. I'm starting mine at like 6 a.m. It's pitch black dark.
Yeah.
It ain't a stitch of light. 6 a.m.
Running in the dark is a little bit testy. You're like, man, I hope they're not looking at their phone because they'll never see this flashing light. Right. So you got to be a lot more cautious with that. But it's a little dark.
And then, so if anybody hadn't listened to Colby Coltrane, you were the contact I got for Colby Coltrane, and that episode's doing well. People are listening to it, so hopefully, if they're listening to this, eventually they'll go back and listen to it again because he got some really good insight. I know he's a personal friend of yours.
Yeah.
TJ Carr is a farrier and someone that trims and does all our horses' feet at the horse unit here. All the equestrian team horses, keep in shoes and keep fit, and then we'll go to Colby Coltrane here in a minute because I think y'all have a neat connection.
Yeah, for sure.
Give us just a picture. Like, I don't know what the variation is. People who are listening to this podcast probably are brand new horsemen, and there's probably some veterans out there too, I would think. But what is the day-to-day kind of grind on someone who's a farrier? And you're creating your own business, but are you are you in that business 8, 9, 10 hours a day? Is there more work out there for you? Is there as much as you can handle, or?
Yeah, I mean, I could work 7 days a week, probably 20 hours a day easily. I mean, there's way more horses out there than you realize, even in this area. So we're in the Golden Triangle. We're around Starkville, Starkville, Columbus, that area. Not a big area. I don't take care of all the horses here. There's still way more here. So if you do good work, you got a good rapport out there, then yeah, you can stay as busy as you want shoeing horses.
Now, what do you think is here's the biggest question for me with farrier work. Anybody who's got a horse has got to ask themselves what you just said. You said a good farrier. How in the world do you define a good farrier? If you were to tell someone who's a brand new horse owner or someone who's looking for a farrier, what are there 2 or 3 things hey, you better be looking for this to find someone who's not just competent but skilled craftsman?
I guess one of the most important things is horsemanship. I mean, that's something that is kind of a dying thing in our industry, in our country. I mean, in our industry, how many true horsemen are there out there anymore? It's kind of slim. If you're not a good horseman, you don't know how to handle the horse, then you can't even interpret or read what the horse is trying to tell you, what you need to do, what needs changing. And then the other thing, if your horse is staying sound, you probably got a pretty good farrier. I mean, we depend on the vets. We need them as part of the team. We need the owner as part of the team. But if we can do a good job with them, then we can limit the cost of having to get them injected and getting the vet involved more frequently. There's a lot of different little aspects to the shoeing or the trimming or whatever, but I guess those would be the most important. Is there
something about the shape of the foot that we can be cautious about? I tell you my experiences when I'm watching someone come out and shoe a new farrier that trimmed my horse, and I'm looking for the roundness of the foot and also the way the foot hits the ground and makes impact, and the way that horse naturally moves. I think it'd be kind of like, and again, you're the expert, not me, but wearing a pair of shoes, you could wear a pair of shoes and they wear to the outside versus the inside. So a horse that may wear a little more of his foot to the outside, and then farrier comes out, trims that up, and makes it look even, or puts some heel on, whatever it may be. But the neatness of the way that foot looks, uniformity, I guess, is the right answer. That to me is kind of an indicator of, okay, this person is not just trimmed a foot, but he's taken confirmation into consideration about the anatomy of the foot, right, and then put it together. Right,
yeah. Keeping the distortion, or what we call keeping the foot gathered, keeping the distortion out, that's a big key. You mentioned the shape of the foot. One of the first things that Nick Thompson, the guy that taught me shoeing years ago, told me was front feet are shaped like apples, back feet like pears. And if you look at them, they are. The front feet are rounder. They're more for steering, guiding the horse. The back feet are more spade-like. They're for digging and pushing the foot forward, locomotion. That kind of goes to the shape. You're one.
I never even thought about that, but it makes complete sense to that. Yeah, now that I think about it, put a horse in my head, I can see front foot's a little bit more circular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just more stability up there for guiding left, right, whatever it may be. One of the other things that when you're looking at the foot, you want to keep the foot on the shoe over that 4-week, 5-week, 6-week cycle, whatever the cycle is. Once you get past 6 weeks, depending on the time of year, in the winter, you can go a little bit longer because the feet don't grow as fast. They're putting on hair, they're putting that nutrient and that protein into other aspects. But keeping the foot on the shoe is one of the key things too. That way you don't get that distortion, because once the foot goes over the shoe, then you're losing that foot, just getting distorted. Feet are falling apart that way.
One of the things that you hear, I hear all the time, is there's this controversy between shoe to not to shoe. A lot of people are big advocates of barefoot horses. I'm not one. I think there's a reason that we put shoes on one, and I've seen horses do better with them on than off. Where do you fall on that? Where do you think the argument lies?
I mean, I think with anything, as close to nature as you can get is good. But when you're out there competing, riding these horses, doing what they need to do, there's really three main reasons that you're going to have shoes. Protection, to keep that foot from wearing. A lot of these, the grounds and the surface, the materials in these arenas that we have now is very abrasive. So if you were riding and competing a barefoot horse, they're going to wear their foot off faster than they can grow it. So that would be one of the top reasons that we put them on, is just to protect that foot. And then for traction would be the second reason. And then for a therapeutic reason, if they have some joint issues, they need help with breakover, they need a wedge, whatever it may be. Those are the three main reasons. So, I don't think that either one is wrong. I think where we go wrong is when we try to use one solution for a lump sum of animals. That's where we miss it.
I always stick to, and again, I don't know much about this other than my personal experience. I did one time when I was in grad school have Jay Niesemeyer, who's a farrier out there in Texas. He also had more work than he could. I mean, like, this guy was covered up. He making a good living.
Yes, sir.
But I actually asked him one time, like, let me trim a few with you. I want to learn how to do this, in a very novice fashion, but I'd like to experience it, If you don't do it, you don't appreciate the work that goes into it. Yeah. That is not an easy job. And what it did for me is it made me appreciate it a little bit more writing the check. I didn't mind it quite as much.
Yeah.
Once I did it a few times. But I would also, my horses, I always had some period, like you were talking about performing, I always had some period in which I was pulling shoes off for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. We get back from the World Show in November, and I'd pull shoes till March. Yeah. And just trim, or April, and just trim, and then cycle them back on.
Right.
Is that a good practice, you think?
100%. 100%. So, yeah, used to we could do that because we didn't have shows year-round. We didn't have all these indoor arenas, these nice facilities that you can show. It doesn't matter what the weather is, you can go and show. But what that does is it gives the foot, the horse, the opportunity just to kind of indicate which way it needs to go, where that foot, the way its joints, its conformation, its way of going is most beneficial to them. Years ago, I did have a horse I was shoeing, and trying to get it textbook, it was a show horse. Man, it needed to look good. And I had it looking pretty dang good. But that sucker was more crippled than you could think. We pulled the shoes off for 2 cycles, so about 3 months. And I went back and I shot him just the way his foot looked. It didn't look good. He was kind of crooked and all. But I just shot him the way he wore his feet. And he was fine that way. And so I think we're missing that opportunity now where we had 3 months or whatever, kind of an off period, to let that horse just relax, be natural, and then come back and just try to replicate what it was indicating was best for it.
And what I've always, again, I don't know everything about this by any means, but what I've always thought about is if you don't, couple things. So one time a farrier showed me that he put a barefoot on might have been you actually. It's either you or Jay, one of the two. Put a barefoot on the concrete and then pulled it off, and you could see the moisture. Mm-hmm. So there's this, that foot's doing something there, right? And then also thinking about the performance horse as he hits the ground, that foot actually expanding.
Yeah.
Then you think about the anatomy of the frog, and it helps to shunt blood back up the foot or the leg. So I think that's where this focus comes from, is we put this piece of iron on the bottom of the foot. We're inhibiting contact from the ground. We're inhibiting expansion of the foot, and we're also inhibiting, to some degree, contact with the frog. So does that kind of sum it up?
100%. Yep.
So putting them back to barefoot is going to help.
Right.
Those three concepts.
For sure. I mean, what's one of the most common things you see with pleasure horses? They're heel sore. What's the most common way of shooting them? Well, it's wedge them up. So we're just increasing that clearance, that depth away from the ground that the frog is, and it's constantly seeking the ground, seeking support. And so a lot of the issues that we have with horses, we're causing by what we're doing.
Why would they wedge them up like that?
gosh, I don't, I think it's like a lot of things. They saw, oh, Joe Schmo beat me there, and he had his horse wedged up, so I'm going to do what he did instead of thinking, maybe I need to be a better rider. Maybe I could perform better. It's got to be those shoes. And so I think it was just kind of a bandwagon that everybody jumped on that was working for some horses. That's what I think. That's just my theory. I have no idea if that's right or not.
Well, there's so much corrective shoeing that goes into this stuff, and so many people have bar shoes and wedge pads and all this stuff. And I've seen, you're not, I've seen you shoe enough. You're pretty technical. You've got a lot of tricks of the trade, I would think, with all the things you use. What are some of the reasons someone might accept the fact that they need corrective shoeing?
That's kind of been a pet peeve of mine for a while. I think, there were a lot of guys that, I'm a corrective shoer. That was kind of a sales tactic in my mind. Because in my mind, there's correct shoeing and there's incorrect shoeing. And it's really just that simple. So I think corrective would, trying to think, trying to complement maybe a deficiency that the hoof has or that the horse's conformation, lends to, things like that. But I think it's more just correct shoeing for what that horse needs, what that horse's conformation and stuff indicates. Its hoof indicates it needs. You talked about shoe wear or pulling shoes and the way they wear the shoe. That's a big thing. Is when I pull those shoes, I'm looking at the wear patterns. What is that shoe telling me that foot needs? Is it wearing it more on the lateral toe, the medial toe? What? Because in my mind, that's saying, all right, I need to take more off here. It's trying to wear it down so that it's more comfortable in that lateral toe or whatever it may be. So shoe wear is a big thing to me.
What about horses that are like prone to navicular, founder? There's a place for bar shoes, or is there some other way we can work them back to get to a place where they're just being normally shod?
Most of the time, yeah. There's always, let's just say, for example, we're talking about the way the foot functions, what the frog does, such as that. One of the most common things I'm seeing now is like caudal failure, or the back part of the foot, low heels, underrun, crushed,
Because the farrier took too much heel off, or the horse wore heel?
Or because we got it wedged up, and so that foot's constantly seeking some support from the ground. So what happens is the heels just end up being compromised and crushed because the back part of that foot is looking for support. And so the heels is the weakest link in that puzzle, because basically from the widest part of the foot forward is attached to the coffin bone by the lamina. So it's pretty fixed. It's not as palatable as the back part of the foot, but that's why there's a lot more flex. And you're talking about expanding, contracting. That happens from the widest part of the foot back. And so, it's things like that. When you get that failure in the back part of the foot, then yes, you're going to have to incorporate the way I've approached it. I'm not saying it's the only way, or there's other ways, I'm sure, but I always incorporate the frog in that support. It needs that support. We can take some of the load off of the heels, and then the heels can relax. They can get back to a strong point where they're not compromised. So a heart bar or a frog support type pad, like a Myron McLean, a 3D pad. I'm not trying to sell anything. That's just what I use. And then pour-in material, impression or some type of pour-in pad material, so that you're incorporating a lot more structure of that foot in the support, rather than just leaving it kind of in the open.
I've seen you cover the whole bottom side of the foot.
Yeah.
And so if I want contact with the frog in the ground, first, what would be the purpose of covering the whole bottom of the foot if I needed to do that? And two, are you telling me when you do that, you're not leaving distance there so that that frog is making contact with something, or what would be the purpose in doing that?
In going all the way to the ground surface, it would be protection and support. Those two things. Basically, you're almost mimicking that horse being barefoot. You're giving it some contact. without making it like concrete or, really hard mud or whatever. The materials that we use have some pliability to them. And so that would be the reasoning kind of behind doing a full pour in.
Yeah. So I don't know if I told you this or not, but Saturday I'm doing a series. This is the first of a series called New Horse Owners Workshop. We're actually doing it on Facebook Live just so we can get a lot, more interest potentially to get on there. It's easier, reach a wider audience. But one of the things that always kind of strikes me when I talk to people who are first-time horse owners or buyers or considering is they think a lot of times the purchase price is the worst part.
Yeah.
When in actuality, you've got so many of these upkeep things that are happening, like you just mentioned a minute ago, depending on the horse, it could be a 4 to 8 week period in which you're coming back again. So the good thing about it is they get to be friends with you because you're at their house every month. Right. But you're kind of like, what is that old saying that like the best job is a mortician because you're a reoccurring business. You're kind of in that same boat. Like you're creating this reoccurring business all the time.
Yeah.
What are the expectations you think that new horse owners should have? So I'm talking to these people on Saturday, and in reference to farrier work, what are some principles that you think they should be expected to know?
I mean, the biggest thing is keep them on a schedule. If you'll keep them on a tight schedule, we can ward off a lot of the ailments that they may develop. Because once you go past that 6-week period and you get that distortion going, then you're fighting an uphill battle trying to get ahead of it. Where if you'll keep them on a tighter schedule, you can get ahead of a lot of the distortions, the heel failure, the problems that they may have. And so ultimately it ends up saving you money because you're not having to have the vet come out and inject them or keep them on, some kind of supplement. I mean, maybe they all need to be on supplement. I don't know. It's an individual horse. But,
that's another podcast there is
oh, man.
Vet practices and supplementation.
Yeah. But keeping them on a schedule with the farrier is key to keeping them sound where they're more comfortable and they're more enjoyable. You don't want to ride a crippled horse. You want to ride a comfortable horse, But yeah, the farrier work is going to be expensive,
Give us a ballpark range of prices for expectation. A trim would be.
I mean, you're looking at around $60 probably in this area, depending on where you go. It could be $120.
If you're in Palm Beach, Florida, it might be.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
A lot more.
It would be a lot more. It would be a lot more.
And full set of shoes.
Full set of shoes, you're going to look at $175 to $200 probably, upward of that.
Yeah, and that's always
going to be a low end
when I'm giving lessons or coaching kids or whatever. And a lot of times they're so apprehensive about reprimanding their horse or getting after him, or expecting too much. That's kind of what it is. I always tell them, like, do you spend $150 a month on your shoes a month? Well, you bought him a pair of $150 shoes every month of his life. He owes you.
Yeah.
So he can work a little.
Right. That's right.
Then they're kind of like, oh, okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But I don't think we think about it sometimes when you buy a horse that you're going to have to do that. Dang, if I got to put shoes on him every 4 to 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, you're going to have a couple $1,000s just in the foot care over the course of a year, if you're keeping them on a cycle.
Right, and keeping them healthy. And that part you said about keeping them on a cycle because of the lameness issue, when I was showing probably at my peak, that was in the back of my mind all the time is I got a good one, taking him to the big shows, when's he going to go lame? When is it going to happen? Because it's just going to happen. It's a performance animal and so many crazy things just rear their ugly head. I remember a few years ago, it's been probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was at the World Show, made the finals, and there was like a day in between. Everything was going great. I go out to lunch this thing. I think the finals started at 7 o'clock at night. I go out in the morning to get him out, let him lunge, and his ears are up. He's happy as a lark, and he's lame. And I thought, dang, and you just try to manage through those things. But yeah, I agree with you that preventative, that overall routine maintenance can help a lot in the terms of prevention. You just stick to it. A lot of people sometimes, I think we stretch them out. And that's where we can run into some problems.
Yeah.
What do you think are some problems that would occur? Let's say that I'm trying to stretch my budget a little bit, and I run one out 8 to 10 weeks, and shoe falls off, or like you were talking about coming over the top of the shoe. What are some things problematically that I could expect if I did something like that?
Bruising, abscesses. The foot's just going to get crumbly and fall apart, so it may be harder to keep a shoe on if it's one that has to have shoes. At least if they're barefoot, they have the opportunity to wear that foot. Once they have shoes on there, it's protected. Like, they can't just wear it off, in their everyday routine. So that would be the biggest thing, would be abscesses, bruising, and the foot falling apart on you.
And then you got a recovery period beyond those.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Then you're going to spend a cycle or two trying to get that foot kind of back in order, and then go again.
Little things like thrush, or things that are manageable because we can clean stalls, keep them out of the mud, as much as we can to prevent thrush. Is there any other types of those manageable things I can do too? What are some good practices, I guess, besides just trying to keep the foot clean and
cleaning the foot out? Thrush is anaerobic bacteria, so it doesn't like oxygen. So the easiest thing you can do is clean the foot out, let some oxygen get there. You've kind of medicated it without having to put anything on the foot, But what somebody said one time, the biggest cause of thrush is rusty hoof picks. They get rusty because they're not being used.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest keys, is just looking at that sucker. That's what I like so much about, like, I know we'll talk about Colby and Gianna, whatever, but man, their horses get their feet cleaned every day. They get their feet cleaned. They're trying to stay ahead of something. Man, that's nice to be part of that, because even though I'm only out there every 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever it may be, that I've got some team members out there they've got my back. We're trying to stay ahead of the game so that when I am out there, I've got good stuff to work on and not fighting infections and battles that way.
And man, you think we live in Mississippi, so it's wet here. Usually from rains probably about right now, October to May, it just rains constantly. So the ground's wet. And and here was the first time I ever had to deal with horses having abscesses.
Yeah.
I don't really remember a ton of abscesses in Texas. And of course, it's a lot drier too. And,
right.
And I don't know if it's the soil climate, or what, but.
One of the biggest seasons of abscesses we have here is the change in seasons between the wet and the dry. Because when we're wet, say spring, because over the winter it'll get wet and it'll stay wet because it's just cooler, it doesn't dry out as quick. So the feet expand. That's what the feet, expand and contract. So they expand, they're more porous. That's when some kind of foreign debris, bacteria, fungus, whatever, a foreign body, a rock, something gets in there. Then when the foot dries, that can't escape, so it's trapped it. So then that's the foot's response is, something's here that's not supposed to be here. So they send the white blood cells and get an abscess, and that's kind of how that happens usually.
Yeah, that explains a lot, because like I said, I don't think I ever dealt with as many abscesses as we have since moving here. It's just it's wild, but it's constantly wet. College Station, it didn't rain, but about 5 times a year it seemed like, where it's just never was wet. It's always dry.
Right.
But you mentioned Colby Coltrane, and again, if people haven't listened to that episode, I thought Colby did a good job of discussing Storybook Farms and what they do. How did you? So he lives in Texas, Argyle, is that right?
Argyle, that's right. That's right.
And so you're going out there every 6 weeks and shoeing horses for them. How'd that all come about?
So back in 21. David Hodges, a friend of mine down on the coast, he was the farrier for the Winter Classic, the big jumper show down there, that circuit. And he asked me to come down and do a week. His daughter was expecting their first grandchild. I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I mean, this is way outside of my comfort zone. These are some really nice horses. I don't need to screw this up. But yeah, I went. And Colby actually was the first person that brought a horse over there for me to stick a shoe on. And there's just, hopefully anybody that's listening at some point in your life, you'll have the same experience. And I'm sure you will if you recognize it, where there's just some people that you'll meet that you're like, man, those are my people. I don't know them. I don't
You
know
just
if
met
I'm
him by
out of touch.
happenstance then.
I just met him by happenstance, but I'm like, man, that's my guy, So anyway, I did a little work for him that week, and it was like, I want to say Saturday afternoon. He stops by the shop. I was still there, and he's like, hey, when are you leaving? I was like, hopefully tomorrow. If the Grand Prix is over, it's at 2 o'clock on Sundays down there. I said, if it's over in time, then I'll head home, 4 hours. He's like, well, we got a few horses we'd like for you to shoe. I'm like, well, we'll start them in the morning. So let me back up so on that Thursday, I'd put a shoe on Conquer, his horse. Conquer's got pretty shelly feet, he's a good shoe puller. And so I'd stuck a shoe on him. He came back later that day. He's like, hey, why don't you just go ahead and do him? He had a couple of other shoes that were questionable too. So I did him. They liked the job that I did on him. So that's kind of how that started. And then, so anyway, I was like, yeah, we'll just start on them tomorrow. And then, if I don't get finished up, I'll finish them Monday and then go home. He's like, well, 2 of them are going to be in the Grand Prix, so we'll have to wait till Monday. And I was like, oh, man, I didn't need to hear that. Now I'm really got a little pressure. Anyway, I agreed to stay, and had not met Gianna at that time. And he's like, hey, I'm going home for the weekend. When the show's over, go home, just make sure everything's good at the farm. Here's Gianna's number. She'll get the horses over to you in the morning. And so that night, I get that, she's like, hey, what time do you want to start? I was like, hey, it's 7:30. Is that okay? Yeah, that's good. Thank you for being awesome. I'm like, man, I don't even know this person, but, this seemed pretty nice. So the next morning, she brings the horses over. It was Flex-Tia and Saffron, 2 mares she had. And we talked for a little while, and I'm like, yeah, there's a connection here. I don't get it, but it's there. So later that year, they were at a show. They were in Colorado and had kind of a bad experience with the show farrier there. And they're like, dang, where's TJ when you need him? I'm like, well, y'all are way too far now. Y'all are in Colorado. They got into Iowa, kind of the same thing, but I was able to get them a hookup with the guy up there to do the horses, did a great job. And we planned my weeks in 22 when their horses would be due, and I would do them at the Winter Classic when I was there. And so that's kind of how it started. Did Sneak's mare that she's still riding, incredible little mare. And my daughter went out and spent a week with them after they got home, and she's like, hey, when you come back to get Josie, they'll be at 5 weeks. We like to keep them on that schedule. Would you do them one more time at least? I'm like, yeah, I can't tell you no. You've had my daughter, and y'all been gracious for that. So I did them, and she called me a couple weeks after that. It's like, hey, have you thought about coming back to Texas? I was like, I would be lying if I told you no, but I just don't know, how we can make it work. Like, I've got a conscience. It's hard for me to tell you what you'd have to pay me so I don't lose money, And she's like, figure out how many horses you can work on or you want to work on, and I'll make it happen. So that's kind of how it started.
So do you fly out there every month and a half or so?
Yeah, every 5 weeks. We normally try to keep them on a 5-week schedule, but we'll play with it a little bit just to work around their show schedule. If they're going to be in Colorado or Tryon or wherever it may be, we accommodate the horses. And starting out, it was mainly just their show string. So over the next several months in 22, when I was going out there, I accumulated all the tools and stuff that I needed. So now, I may take a few shoes, but I don't take anything else out there. My anvil, my forwards, everything's there.
How'd you get all that? Did you have to just buy it or round it up or borrow it or what?
There again, that's one of those, like, everything happens for a reason and not by chance. I'm not a big Facebook marketplace at all. My son will show me stuff on there, but I don't ever look at it hardly. But a thing popped up, and it was a cart like that you would have your forwards, your anvil, all that stuff on. It was for sale in Pilot Point, Texas, which is like 30 minutes from them. I'm like, man, that's a pretty good deal. called the guy, and I ended up buying that, and he actually delivered it to their barn,
So it just sits there waiting for you now?
Pardon?
It just sits there waiting for TJ to show up and use it?
It's there. Yeah, I've got 2 boxes out there. If they needed to, they could put them on the trailer, and I could go wherever they are and have everything I needed to do the stuff.
Listen to that. I think it says a heck of a lot about you because there's a lot of good farriers in Texas. A lot of good ones close by, probably. I would think North Texas is horse country.
Yes, sir.
Think of 2 places: is Florida and North Texas is kind of the horse mecca.
Yeah.
So probably that says a lot about your ability if they're flying you out there and getting you business and all that.
I mean, I'm just me. I'm.
Well, that's part of it too.
I'm just me.
That's part of it too. Is good personality goes a long way, and
Yeah.
I think that you were talking about Colby when you gave me his number, and I called him. I know exactly what you're talking about because as soon as Colby and I started talking, it was like we're friends. It was easy.
Great guy.
I love those kind of people that you can just strike. I have a friend of mine lives in North Arkansas. We went to high school together. We see each other about once every 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
And every time I'm a typical guy. I don't like talking on the phones. I don't call people that much. But when we could go a year and then pick up the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what Colby is too.
Yeah.
And you're that way too. It's easy to strike up conversation with you as well. So
thank you.
He's a neat guy. I thought he did a great job on the podcast. I'm looking forward to try to go down to Gulfport in February and talk to him about his Mongolian Derby.
Man, that was something, huh?
Has he given you any insight about his experience?
Yeah, my last trip out there, we sat down. We were up for a little while that night because we had to go through a lot of stuff. I wanted to hear it all. So he told me, about waypoints, a lot of the things that went on. It's pretty cool. So
it sounded like it was Gianna's kind of idea at first, or maybe with the whole way and he just tagged along. I'm not sure, but it sounded like she coerced him into doing it.
Yeah, she started all of that. Yeah, it was actually that was in 23 maybe. Yeah, it had to be 23 in Gulfport, and we were at dinner one night having some sushi, and she's like, we're going to ride in the Mongolian Derby in 24. And I was like, what are you even talking about? So they told me about it, but yeah, that was her brainchild, and man, they loved it.
He must really love her.
For sure.
Just to go out there, because I think I'd be like, I think it's a great idea if you do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay at the house. I don't really have much interest, but it's a neat deal, that's for sure. If you could do it, I don't think I could do it.
It was pretty cool.
That's pretty rigorous.
Pretty cool. So,
just here's the last question I got for you. Just kind of wrap all this up. I like in this podcast that we explored so many different avenues for careers and hobbies and numbers of things, especially since we're on a university campus where we got a bunch of 20-year-olds trying to figure out their career path.
Right.
Give us a rundown of how did you come about being one, what drove you to be a farrier? 2, how'd you figure out how to do it?
So what drove me to, it's a long time, farriers are known for not showing up when they say they will, or they say they're coming on Tuesday and maybe Thursday they call and they're still not coming, they just don't show up. So matter of fact, about I'm going to say it was maybe 6 months before I started shoeing, the guy that was doing the horses, he said, man, you ought to pick up shoeing. I'm like, man, that's too much work. There's not a snowball's chance. I'm not doing that. And then lo and behold, I did. But my intention was, I thought, well, I'll just do our horses, and then I was coming down here to go to state and come to college. Well, I'll do some horses. That'll be some spending money, help me while I'm in college, little job. And so that was, May of 99. And so I did that and came down here, was in animal dairy science, and originally thought I might go to vet school. But that just wasn't gonna work out for me. So I thought, well, I'll just do this until I figure out what I want to do for a living, finished with my animal dairy science degree. And that was in the spring of 01, I guess. and I guess I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do, for a living. So, but that's kind of how I got started doing it. And I was fortunate that I was able to get hooked up with Nick Thompson, the guy that kind of taught me shoeing. I'll never forget the first horse I did. Her name was Angel, and she hated just about everybody except for me and Larry Joe Thompson, the one she belonged to. And so anyway, we were doing her, and the first foot he walked me through. I mean, he was holding my hand, did everything. And the second foot was still right there by my side. The third foot, he would kind of walk away, or, oh yeah, let's go look at this horse or that, And then the fourth foot, he was just walking off. I'm like, whoa, where are you going? He said, if you don't figure out how to screw up, you won't figure out what questions to ask. So
that's true in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah. So that was the first horse I did. But then I worked with him for 2 summers. When I wasn't in college, then I would work with him, trying to sharpen up a little bit. And it took me a couple years to figure out how not to fight the horse. And man, he would be doing horses and not break a sweat. And man, I was just dripping sweat everywhere, So
yeah, I don't think people realize until you're the one under there, and it's 90 degrees, how hard a job that is. And then you got some big old gelding leaning on you. And
well, you know what I tell people when they're leaning on them? They'll say, "Oh, he always leans on me." I say, "Well, you know how to get him to stop?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Just don't let him do it.
Don't let him lean."
He doesn't want to fall down, right? So if you don't support him, you're like, he's leaning, you're still supporting him. Just quit supporting him. And he'll be like, yeah, no, he doesn't want to end up on the ground. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, what is there anything in there that we talked a lot about basic management? Talked about getting started, if you're getting into horses and what it's going to cost you. Of course, your life story is how you got into the business is a great one. Is there any other advice out there for anybody that may either A, going to buy a horse, or B, sounds like farrier work would be a good opportunity for them? Is there what would be the biggest piece of advice you think would be something that somebody could be successful with?
If they wanted to be a farrier?
Or life in general. You can go either way. Either way.
The biggest thing is don't do it for the money. Find something you love. And when you do, then you don't have to work. I mean, yeah, I work some long hours. I do some crazy stuff. Ask Kobe when you see him in February. He'll tell you, he's borderline crazy, I think, some of the stuff that he does. The 75 hard, but don't do it for the money. Do it because you love doing it. I mean, one of the biggest satisfactions I get is taking a horse, Honeybee, for example, out there on the farm, or Rebel that has clogs on now that was pretty lame, and you get to see them walk off or trot off or come running up for feed in 3 or 4 days. That's the biggest satisfaction. A Sneaks that was swelling and getting sore after classes, and now she's jumping Grand Prix, and they still ice her, they still do the preventative stuff, but she's not swelling up and getting sore like she was, when we started. So that's what keeps me loving what I do, being able to help that animal perform at the top of what they can. I tell people all the time, I can't give them what God didn't, but I sure can take it away. So my job is to not take it away from that horse, to try to promote everything that it has to the best of my ability.
Well, I think you did both. You answered both those questions with the same answer, and that is it's a great life lesson, a great professional lesson is find something you enjoy. I said it today to a student who was thinking about switching her major from pre-vet because they all want to be pre-vet.
Yeah.
They don't really think it all the way through. In all honesty, if you want to be a vet, it has got to come from here.
100%.
Because they're not the richest. They're probably one of the most in-debt professionals there is. I mean, there's a lot of expense that goes into that. And then the hours and the commitment and the time and all that, it's got to be something you love.
Yeah.
And that's so cliche to say, find something you love and then you'll never have to work. That's so cliche. But it is true. It is definitely true.
Yeah.
Another thing I think that you didn't hit on, but you said it, that I want to highlight, and that is going and shoeing for Colby and going to these Grand Prix and going into a world that I know you well enough to know that hunter jumpers and over fence horses are not your background.
Right.
But stretching yourself to a point where you're always advancing, I'm sure we didn't talk about this, but I bet you anything you could lay out 100 things you learned from going over into this different world.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, a prime example. All right, so the same year that I did sneaks, there was a horse the first week I got there that had an abscess. They were wanting to jump him in the pre, and so he came in like on Tuesday. The pre's on Sunday. Got a quarter crack and an abscess, and they're wanting to jump him over 5-foot fences. That's not a tall order, right? But anyway, the way it ended up working out, he called his farrier, and his farrier said, "Hey, this is what I want done." Okay, well, I'll just do it. I wouldn't fill that foot up to the ground with a pour-in pad, not when he's going up there on the grass for the Grand Prix. He's not going to have any traction. I didn't think in my mind. But lo and behold, we were able to get him back going. I did things outside of my comfort zone, which is kind of I think our greatest growth happens outside of our comfort zone. You stay in your comfort zone, you're not going anywhere.
100%.
And so then I did sneaks a few weeks later, and I was comfortable enough filling that foot all the way to the ground surface, putting the pad that she needed to get the results that we needed. I think if I hadn't learned that a couple weeks prior, then I wouldn't have been comfortable being aggressive enough to get the results that we needed. Maybe we would have got them eventually, but not as quickly. So what could have happened to that horse over the next 2 or 3 cycles if it had taken longer? Would she have bowed a tendon? Would she have torn something? I mean, it could have ended her career. I don't know. I don't know that it would have. But that was another big lesson for me, a kind of a aha moment, like, okay, there's a lot of good that's coming out of this.
Those types of decisions seem really scary on the front side, and then when you kind of get through it, like this podcasting idea and YouTube stuff, I know that's not nothing like compared to what you're doing, but I didn't want to do it because it's kind of scary and out of my comfort zone. And when you start moving into those things, you start learning. You learn things you don't have a clue were to be learned.
Right. And
then on the other side of that, 25 years later, you're 10 times the farrier you were in the beginning.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a quick one. So, I had that bad wreck back in 17, whenever, so going into that, and I'm going to say this was in 16, man, I was looking for anything to do besides shoe horses. Like, I'm done. I'm just done. I'm burnt out, And so I'd fooled with making bits, spurs. I mean, I was doing some other stuff. I'm like, I can do this and still provide for my family, I think, And then, of course, I had that wreck. And then the one thing that I wanted to know was who did the horses I was supposed to have done that day, because she's going on a trail ride. She had to have them done. She goes on Dixie National every year. Were my kids okay? And then, man, I wanted to get back in shoeing. Like, they said I wasn't going to get back in shoeing, and so I thought, well, I'll show them wrong, And it really was just a wake-up. I don't know. But it was like God's moment to say, all right, buddy, you were going the direction that you needed to go, what I have you destined to do, and you're trying to get away from it. So let me just give you a wake-up call. I mean, there was a little bit of an abrupt one, I guess, but as hard-headed as I am, I probably needed that. Any other way, I wouldn't have gotten the message. And so it's really quite amazing how far my career has gone and grown just since that happened,
It's kind of like Todd, you were mentioning in the recap. I don't know if you remember Todd talking about in there that you're typically being prepared.
Yeah.
And it's something that I can relate so much what you're saying, because we started our careers about the same time, 2000, 1999, somewhere in that ballpark. And you can get burnt out with anything.
Yeah.
With anything. But when Todd said that the other day, I thought, man, that's a good perspective to consider. Hey, maybe you're not moving on to the next step because you're still being prepared for that step.
Right.
And I'm thankful we serve a gracious God that he can prevent us from moving to the next step when it's not in our best interest.
Yeah.
And when that happens, sometimes we buck the system, because I'm rebellious too, and I think I know what's best for me.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Right. So when I got where I could, they had collected all my stuff from that wreck. And I had written in the back of one of those like little yellow legal pads, I'd listened to Hoof. He was talking at a church up in Germantown or something. And for whatever reason, now I think I know. But at that point in time, I didn't know why. I took those 2 notes. He said, God gave you this platform to impact and influence others. Don't waste or neglect it always. I had wrote those 2 notes in the back of it. So I opened up this cargo trailer with all the contents they had collected out of my truck. And when I opened the door, laying at the back where I could look down and read it, flip to that page, was that. That's the first things I read. And that's when I went, all right, I got you.
Yeah.
I get it. I see what you're doing here.
Yeah. And it's so egotistical, isn't it? Prideful to think it's all about me and my career.
Yeah.
And it's not.
No.
Now, if you're a believer, then it's not about that at all. And that's why I love having Josh Burkeen on, Todd Martin, those guys that are faithful guys, and they all can relate to exactly what we're talking about. And didn't even mean to talk about this, but it's such good stuff to think, my career's going this way, and I got these plans, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then something happens, whether it's an abrupt car wreck, or it's a personal issue, or it's a family issue, or whatever happens, and then all of a sudden, you're not going that direction anymore.
Yeah.
There's purpose in that too.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to get out of here just because I think it's about time, but appreciate what you do, and I'm grateful and thankful that you're the guy that we get to work with at the horse unit. Glad that relationship's keeping going, and I totally know what you mean about what you're talking about, Colby. I feel the same thing with you, and I appreciate your support for things like 75 hard. That's been a struggle, but it's been also a blessing too. So appreciate your time.
Man, thank you. I appreciate you.
You bet.